Hey everyone, what's up? I'm Hannah Claire. I wanted to talk to you about a few videos I've seen on social media over the past couple days. I believe they originated on TikTok. I watched them on Instagram Reels. They center around the allegation that Nestle, the American brand, has lobbied the federal government to prevent the implementation of a federal paid maternity leave. And the argument is that Nestle, which produces about 30% of baby formula, believes that paid maternity leave would hurt its sales, and therefore it does not want a federally subsidized paid maternity leave in the US. I'm going to play a couple of videos, and I'm going to go through where this allegation comes from, some of the sources that are being cited, and then talk about what I think this means for 2025. So in this first video, a creator is responding to a different creator who had talked about this sort of corrupt playbook that Nestle has. They're saying that the corporate lobby is stopping or convincing members of Congress, members of the government, to not support efforts to institute a paid family leave. They're citing some studies that I'll go into later, or some articles talking about the benefits of breastfeeding. One of the major complaints is that research shows that women who have to return to work after 3 months tend to have the highest formula usage rate. They're more likely to use formula than women who are allowed to stay home longer with their babies. This might seem obvious, it's difficult to maintain a pumping schedule, to breastfeed your baby if you are not with your baby.
I just found out that Nestle lobbies Congress for unpaid leave for mothers.
Yeah, why would a company like Nestle lobby against paid family leave? Well, according to the Yale School of Public Health, a systematic review of studies found women with a minimum of 3 months of maternity leave, paid or unpaid, were at least 50% more likely to continue breastfeeding compared to women returning to work within 3 months of giving birth. Which is to say, if they are able to perpetuate rules that would force a new mom to go back to work right away, that would decrease their likelihood of breastfeeding and increase the likelihood of buying their formula. And according to science, and I know how much these people love science, babies are most likely to survive and grow to their full potential when breastfed. Not only that, breastfeeding promotes brain development and protects infants against malnutrition, infectious diseases, and death, while also reducing the risk of obesity and chronic diseases later in life. But no worries if you or your baby becomes obese. We have something called OptiFast, which are foods for a low-calorie diet to reduce body weight of people overweight, suitable for both total diet replacement or as a replacement for individual meals. And guess who owns OptiFast? Nestle. I guess that's one way to inflation-proof your business.
This next creator is a European woman. She's pointing out that, again, basically the same thing, that there's this allegation against Nestle, which produces a huge amount of baby formula for the market, arguing that the company is intentionally using its influence to discourage the implementation of a federally subsidized maternity leave policy, or parental leave is sometimes what it's called when they believe it should be applied to fathers. I'm going to use maternity leave in this case, or maternal leave, because we're talking about women breastfeeding their children, that being sort of the catalyst for why we would want them to have time to be home with their babies. I think it's interesting that this story is coming up now, especially as we go towards a Trump-Vance White House, especially J.D. Vance, the soon-to-be vice president, has talked a lot about his belief in the importance of the nuclear family for the benefit of everybody involved, but especially children. So,
saw a video about Nestle and how they have been lobbying the US government against introducing paid federal maternity leave in the US, because Nestle produce formula, which is $1 billion market in the US, and they're concerned that if there is federal state maternity pay, then there's going to be less need for formula because more people are going to be able to breastfeed their babies. I did my own research because I didn't quite believe it, and it is true.
So you can see she's pointing out the same kind of obvious correlation. If women can stay home longer and don't need to switch to formula for convenience, or so that other caregivers can take care of their children, if they're able to breastfeed for longer, then that would hurt Nestle's sales.
So then Obviously, I went on the Nestle website to see what their maternity policy was. What did they have to say about it? Well, they've actually got loads to say about paid maternity leave. On their very own website, it says progressive parental leave empowers people and deepens equity. It says that they're committed at Nestle for an equitable workplace for women. So they've introduced a fairly good policy, which is 18 weeks of fully paid leave, plus an optional 8 weeks of unpaid leave for primary caregivers. That's if you're in the US. So they know how fundamental paid parental leave is for women. They go on and on shouting about it on their website, and yet give with one hand and take with the other from the rest of the population in the US, which is one of only 7 countries in the world without paid maternity leave. They're actively dragging millions and millions of women backwards because they want to make more money with baby formula. Thoughts? Did you know about this?
This creator also points out that on Nestle's website, they present themselves as very pro breastfeeding, pro working mom. They use terms like progressive and inclusion. They offer, I believe it's 6 months of paid maternity leave to their female staff members who have children. So they're saying basically you can't accuse us of this because look at our policy. And this creator is arguing that this is a way for them to say, oh no, we do this for our employees, but they're actually hurting American mothers at large. Okay, this next creator, his video is originally from TikTok. I saw it on Instagram Reels. He does talk about a couple different things that Nestle is, in hot water for. You guys can look up Poland Springs. You can look up, labor practices. You can look up cocoa. I'm going to stick to breastfeeding and the policy there just because I want to stay focused on one topic. Sometimes mega corporations can have a lot of complaints against them at once, but he's pointing out that there have been other studies on the corporate influence on our policies towards infant feeding and toward, the way we view health and the start of the family in America.
So let's just talk about Nestle for a second. Did you know that the United States is one of 8 countries that doesn't have a federally mandated paid maternity leave? Nestle is one of the largest players when it comes to infant formula. They make a lot of money off of it, which is why they spend an insane amount of money lobbying Congress so that there is no federally mandated paid maternity leave. So the entire world is essentially like, yeah, mothers should be home with their newborns, but the representatives in the US, our elected officials are like, but Nestle keeps paying us money, so no thanks. And you think they care about your Gerber baby? They don't care. That's pretty messed up, right? That's pretty unethical.
He goes on to talk about how this is an international problem for Nestle, that it's not just their influence on American mothers, but on mothers in third world countries and developing nations. Again, I'm going to stick to sort of the US-based influence that Nestle has, but of course, feel free to research this as you want to. And finally, his suggestion is that you boycott the brand, that you don't buy products generated by Nestle or created by Nestle because of their unethical practices or the allegations of ethics violations. I think the central theme for all of these creators is that, number one, this large corporation, which has control of an important market, is misleading consumers and abusing its powers with its influence among the government, and also that its practices are detrimental to the health of both mothers and children in America. These are really serious allegations. And again, these videos appeared on my feed a lot over the weekend. I think that they're interesting, but I think it's also important to point out that all of the creators that I just showed you have basically the same complaint, and they also seem to originate from the same source. For some people, it's obvious why this matters. They are very aware of the benefits of breastfeeding, but I'm just going to clarify them anyways. I'll include some benefits listed by the CDC. Breastfeeding has been linked to decreased health risks for children, including a decreased risks of SIDS, of obesity, of type 1 diabetes, of other health concerns for mothers. Not only does it promote bonding with the child, but it also has been linked to a decreased risk of ovarian cancer, of breast cancer, and some other health concerns. For babies, it's considered an important way to strengthen their immune system, especially when they're really small. They're basically relying on the mother's antibodies. So all in all, the science supports that breastfeeding, when and if it's possible, is the best option for children in the long term. Of course, there are women who are unable to produce enough milk or, breastfeed their child, and you need formula as an alternative. I think that there will always be a place for formula in all sorts of modern nutrition, but I think the major concern is that a corporation would be implying that the two are interchangeable, and therefore we can govern as if women's ability to breastfeed isn't important and has no long-term implications for their children. The 3 videos I showed you all use similar sources that all tie back to a series that was published by The Lancet in February of 2023. The Lancet's obviously a medical publication, and it talked about corporate influence in breastfeeding, and specifically this concern that Nestle, other major companies, were using their influence to discourage the creation of a federally subsidized maternity leave. So from the Lancet's 2023 publication, breastfeeding has proven health benefits for both mothers and babies in high income and low income settings alike. Yet, less than 50% of babies worldwide are breastfed according to World Health Organization recommendations. For decades, the commercial milk formula industry has used underhanded marketing strategies designed to prey on parents' fears and concerns to turn feeding of infants and young children into a multi-billion-dollar business, generating revenues of about $55 billion each year. The Lancet also wrote, the prioritization of trade interests over health was brought to the forefront in 2018 when U.S. officials threatened to enforce trade sanctions and withdraw military aid to Ecuador unless it dropped a proposed resolution at the World Health Assembly to protect and promote breastfeeding. Some CMF lobbying groups have cautioned against improved parental leave. Duration of paid maternity leave is correlated with breastfeeding prevalence, and duration and absence of or inadequate paid leave forces many mothers to return to work soon after childbirth. Lack of safe spaces for breastfeeding or expressing milk in workplaces or facilities to store breast milk mean breastfeeding is not a viable option for many women. So the concern is that despite the fact that it's recommended, it's encouraged on an international stage, these companies are basically prioritizing their profits. So as an example, The Lancet wrote that typical infant behaviors such as crying, fussiness, and poor nighttime sleep were being portrayed by the commercial milk formula industry as pathological and framed as reasons to introduce formula, when in fact these behaviors are common and developmentally appropriate. They're also arguing that manufacturers have argued that not only does formula alleviate discomfort, digestional issues, but also it can improve sleep, that their formulas are enhanced so that it can improve intelligence and help the babies. They're promoting it as this implied better option, is the allegation from the writers of this series for The Lancet. The Lancet wrote, infant feeding is further commodified by cross-promotion of infant, follow-on, toddler, and growing-up milks using the same branding and numbered progression, which aims to build brand loyalty and is a blatant attempt to circumvent legislation that prohibits advertising of infant formula. So the Lancet's allegations in 2023 were picked up and amplified by the World Health Organization, which supported the study, as well as the Yale School of Public Health and Time Magazine. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. If you go back, you can see that some of the creators are using screenshots of these sources in their videos. So in its publication supporting this 2023 Lancet series, Professor Nigel Rowlands, who's a scientist at the World Health Organization, said this new research highlights the vast economic and political power of big formula milk companies, as well as the serious public policy failures that prevent millions of women from breastfeeding their children. And he called for actions from across different areas of society to better support mothers breastfeeding. They're ultimately alleging that despite knowing better, Nestle, companies like Nestle, because again, Nestle is sort of dominant in America, but there are other major producers of formula, are abusing and exploiting concerned parents who just want their babies to sleep through the night, who are concerned about their baby not getting proper nutrition. One of the co-authors of the series that was published by The Lancet was Rafael Perez Escamilla, who's a professor of public health at the Yale School of Public Health, and is described as a leading authority on breastfeeding policy and early childhood nutrition. Perez Escamilla writes, babies are most likely to survive and grow to their full potential when breastfed. Breastfeeding promotes brain development and protects infants against malnutrition, infectious diseases, and death, while also reducing risks of obesity and chronic diseases later in life. Yet globally, many women who wish to breastfeed face multiple barriers, including insufficient parental leave and lack of support in healthcare systems and at the workplace, in the context of exploitative marketing tactics of the commercial milk formula industry. According to Time, manufacturers make unsubstantiated claims about their products, such as they're very similar to actual breast milk and they can ease infants' discomfort. The Lancet Medical Journal is calling for an industry crackdown. New products such as hypoallergenic or organic formulas or those derived from milks of sheep or goats are sometimes marketed with the implication that they have special benefits and are sold at premium prices. The report also criticizes the industry for targeting health professionals, caregivers, and families through pervasive social media, promoting formula as a positive choice, and devoting huge resources to lobbying against legislation to protect breastfeeding. So now that we've gone over where this allegation against Nestle is coming from, this 2023 publication and the promotion of this across a couple different platforms, I want to look at Nestle's response. So on its website, Nestle has completely denied this allegation that it lobbies against paid maternity leave. Online, it has, under a Q&A section, has Nestle lobbied to oppose breastfeeding policies? Nestle says, "We strongly support breastfeeding and have not wavered on this position. We have not, nor would we ever, lobby any governments to oppose breastfeeding policies anywhere in the world. We believe that breastfeeding is the best start for babies. We will continue promoting exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life. Where mothers cannot or choose not to breastfeed, we believe infant formula provides the only alternative. We continue our commitment to responsibly and compliantly offer products to support mothers and caregivers who need or choose an alternative to breastfeeding." So a couple things to point out here. Generally, I've always heard moms are encouraged to breastfeed their child if they can for a full year to really to give them all of the health benefits, including the immunity and to fully see the increased health benefits. This is saying the first 6 months of life, which is interesting. Some of the more generous countries in terms of paid parental leave, I think 6 months seems to be a pretty extensive maternity leave. So that might reflect kind of an average time in Europe, which is why Nestle has settled on this as opposed to a year. And you have to acknowledge that they have, there is something correct about what they're saying. I mean, if a child can't be breastfed, if the mom's not around, if the mom can't produce enough milk, if whatever the issue is, they have to eat something. So there is a need for formula out there. I think it's interesting that they say they've never opposed any government, and we have a specific citation of something or a specific allegation of a country in which they have potentially used their influence to discourage breastfeeding friendly policies. But Nestle is presenting itself as very pro breastfeeding, obviously, despite its conflicts. In a different statement on its website, Nestle says that it believes nutrition is extremely important for infants, especially for giving them the best start to life. And it says, "We have a strict global policy of not promoting infant formula anywhere for babies under 6 months as a minimum. However, we understand that breastfeeding is not always possible and inappropriate alternatives to breast milk are widespread." So basically, their products are reliable for when they're needed, and the implication obviously is you wouldn't want a baby to be given something that it couldn't digest or that could potentially be harmful or not, be the second best option. So when I was looking into these allegations against Nestle, I was trying to figure out the best way to determine its lobby influence and how directly it could be correlated to modern votes on things like the Family Medical Leave Act or different efforts to expand federal parental leave. And I found this study that was published by the International Breastfeeding Journal. And the study reviewed specifically Nestle's marketing and corporate political activities from 2018 to determine what its influence was or how its influence was used in relationship to promoting breastfeeding and sort of pro-family policies. And the study says while there's a large literature on violations of the WHO code, there's limited research that document the corporate influence of the baby food industry at the country level. The study goes on to basically call for more research, continued monitoring of corporate political activities, and those involved in it. Again, Nestle controls about 30% just over of the American infant formula market. And so they're saying that if we were better able to present policymakers with data about what their influence is doing, basically how promoting formula over breastfeeding could potentially have negative implications for our healthcare system, for our young people, for the mothers in this country, you could, potentially, quote, bring an end to the interference of the baby food industry in public policies and programs. The study says, at a minimum, such measures would include efforts to improve transparency and accountability for any private-public interactions between government, health professional associations, civil society organizations, and the private sector, such as the food industry. So the conclusion of the study states, this study showed that Nestle used various CPA strategies which may have influenced public policy, research, and practice in ways favorable to the industry. The findings of this study could be used by public health advocates, civil society organizations, the media, and the public to further recognize and preempt the influence of corporations on health in order to ensure that commercial interests do not prevail over public health goals. So why does this matter? Why am I talking about these videos? Number one, because I think it's amazing that social media could basically re-highlight an issue that mainstream media or more prominently funded outlets tried to call attention to almost 2 years ago. The Lancet, the WHO, and Yale were working on their series and published them in 2023. It took basically creators on Instagram and TikTok in 2025 to highlight this issue and to call public attention to it again. I think this cycle of bringing up, I'm going to say, scandals for corporate companies to constantly have to answer is interesting. Even on its website, Nestle has a whole section where it talks about previous boycotts against it. They are trying to present as transparent as possible on this issue. It's obviously something that has been going on for decades, but this specific allegation about lobbying that's circulating on social media initially started in 2023. So I think it's notable that social media basically makes it so all corporations have to be constantly looking over their shoulder. It's difficult for them to respond. In fact, Nestle was posting over the weekend, and I'll insert a screenshot here, and in the response, someone said, "What about your lobbying?" And Nestle has this response that it gives back saying, "No, we don't lobby against breastfeeding. We're very supportive." And in fact, you can find them reposting this on X several times because they get asked pretty regularly, especially if you're someone who uses social media. You look at the TikTok video or the Instagram reel, and then you move over to X to say, "Nestle, what are you doing?" And Nestle has to answer for it over and over and over again. So it's interesting. I definitely don't think you should just believe everything that appears on your TikTok feed or your Reels feed, which is why I started Googling this. I had never heard of this allegation, but logically it makes a lot of sense. If you sell a product that solves a problem created by our modern work industry, you wouldn't want to solve the issue. You wouldn't necessarily want women to return to work a year after having a baby or 6 months after having a baby, when you know ultimately that women who return to work after 3 months are the most likely to become dependent on formula and therefore start using the formula, throughout their child's life. I also think it's important to talk about this issue because especially J.D. Vance, when he was on the debate stage in 2024, really called on the government to become more pro-family. I think pro-family is an inclusive movement. I don't think it's just about mothers. I think it includes infants and fathers as well. I think that especially as we see RFK Jr. potentially become the Secretary of Health and Human Services, this idea that corporate influence is prioritizing profits over what's best for children could become something you see more regularly. I wouldn't be surprised if RFK is one of the first people to push back against this kind of thing. Again, there is a use case for formula in the world. I don't think that you would just ever get rid of it. Obviously, you want it to be safe, you want it to be nutritious. But if we know, if the science proves that breastfeeding has the highest positive outcomes for both mothers and infants, we should want that to be the standard. We should want not just for women to have the option to do it, but hypothetically have a lot of support behind it, because children who have adverse health issues, if they have higher obesity levels or anything else, especially if their family is dependent on government aid, are ultimately more dependent on the government. This is something that could cost us long term. Effectively, what I'm saying is allowing mothers the chance to breastfeed for as long as possible would potentially have a long-term net positive for our healthcare, for the health of our nation, as well as our overall government spending. And you can kind of see it in some of these creators' videos. They're arguing it's a woman's issue, that women are basically being misled by corporations, and also, they don't have the option to choose to stay home with their babies because they don't have leave, and then they're dependent on, they have to buy these products and it's expensive, and so it's a burden on them if we don't give them more support. I think one of the challenges is the government has already spent so much money. We have such high debt. Do we want another major social net created by the federal government, regulated by the federal government, which is not always that effective? And is there an alternative? Is there another way to encourage and support women to be able to take maternity leave and stay with their kids, especially during that first year, 6 months, that wouldn't necessarily require another huge, multi-million-dollar investment from the federal government? And I don't know the answer to that. I would be really curious to see people like Thomas Massie and Congressman Tim Burchett and RFK talk about this issue, because I think it matters. I think long term we want to have healthy families, both emotionally healthy but also physically healthy. And so if we have an easy way to do this, why wouldn't we? And what is the best way to do it without creating an oversized, bloated government? So definitely give me your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think of a federal maternity leave. Do you think it's worth it? Do you think it would cost too much money? I definitely consider myself someone who's sort of a fan of small government. So as much as I think it's important to have a pro-family culture, I don't necessarily have the blueprint on how to get there. But I'm glad these videos are circulating, because I think it's an important conversation to have. And let me know what you think of Nestle. Are they dirty lobbyists, or are they actually looking out for women and children by providing an alternative product? I'd be curious to hear your feedback. Thanks so much for watching. You can always follow me on social media. I'm on X under the same handle, Hannah Claire B. If you miss me during the week, I'll probably have videos up once a week. But if you would like to see more content, you should go to the Quarterings channel on Rumble. I live stream with the Quartering 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So you can check me out over there. And let me know if there's something else you're interested in, especially as we see the installation of the Trump administration, the turnover of the new federal government. Are there issues that you'd like me to talk about or to research for you? I'd be happy to do it. Thanks for your support.